The Athene Real Talk Podcast explores controversial ideas to stimulate debate and active thinking. These ideas do not always reflect Athene's personal views. Welcome to the Athene Real Talk Podcast.
He has been called the best gamer in the world, hands down.
World-famous gamer and philanthropist Athene.
Gaming for Good, it's called, has raised more than $20 million.
Using his notoriety to raise money for charity.
On activism, science, culture, and self-development.
Proud to have him in the studio today. I would not want to take you on in a video game.
But the thing is, a lot of people when they go through life, they ask themselves a lot of questions. The problem with that is, most of the time, the answer to the question does not really answer your question. So a lot of the times when you ask the question, the answer to the question does not really answer the real issue, which is the emotions that bring about the post-rationalization where you ask the question in the first place. And what I mean with that is when you look at evolutionary biology and you look at the brain, we are very primitive. Our emotions, when we're very young, we're just a cocktail of emotions, and then as we grow up we start intellectually channeling all these core emotions. So if you don't have so much love when you were young, or if you had a lot of fear or anxiety, they start creating intellectual concepts that manifest themselves in the taste of music, or what you're interested in, or what you're going to study, or whatever. So you have that illusion of choice and freedom, but in essence it's just all rationalizations based on either insecurities or fears or whatever. And as a result, when you're then asking questions about these rationalizations, like for example, why is this, why is that, it is actually the real answer goes underneath it, where it is the emotions, maybe of insecurity or fear or whatever, that brings about these questions in the first place. So when you're asking, or when you're depressed about the world, or when you go like, the world is shit, why is the world to shit? It's not so much that the world is to shit. It's mainly because you are rationalizing certain insecurities in yourself and channeling it intellectually, and as a result you express your views and your ideas like that. But the real reason is not because the world is too shit, but it's because you have a very strong, self-hate or whatever. So like being aware of that, you start realizing that it's not so much the answer to the question that is important, but rather why you're asking the question in the first place. Because when you have an answer to that, all the irrelevant questions are just washed away. You don't need answers to questions anymore. So many questions you don't even care about anymore. You will mainly care about answers to questions that are more relevant to who you are and what you are and your practical environment and such, rather than all these other things. So I think that's a very important insight, because it can really help you grow. And that's what I want to connect to. I think one of the most important things, and that's why I even started the entire explanation about the feral child and everything, you have to be able to look at yourself from an observer perspective. When you are experiencing your thoughts and your ideas, if you have all the time thoughts in your head, right? There's literally an ability that you have to look at that as an observer, instead of just being that, just being your thoughts. You can literally just look at your thoughts and your emotions as an observer. Just as much as you see someone else when he talks to you, you can just observe that person, right? You can just look at that person as an outsider, which you are, and just think about like his ideas and his emotions. You can do that, right? You have the mental ability to do that. But you can do the same thing with yourself. And that is such a powerful thing to do, because it allows you to take distance. But in order to do that, you need to be able to project. So I wonder how many people even have the mental capacity to do that, because it's crucial to understand all these insights. Because when I talk about subconsciousness and all the things, if you're just trapped into your thoughts and your emotions, then what I say just sounds like Chinese. You feel like you can't do anything about it. So that's why looking at yourself from an observer, looking for yourself as a third perspective, is extremely, extremely important to be able to overcome certain flaws. I tell people to read The Power of Now, because that's something that is explained in there. But it really allows you to be in the present. It really allows you to just experience what you are now. It allows you more easily to meditate as well and put things into context. But as long as you don't do that, as long as you cannot look at yourself as an observer, there's nothing I can say that will put your thoughts into context. You just can't do it. You can't even compare. You can't compare with someone else's life. I will give you guys an example of being able to look at yourself as an observer. And it's going to be a really, really, really crazy example, but it will allow you to understand what I mean. I'm going to give a Nazi example, because it will allow you to understand what I mean. Can you imagine that you would be Hitler? And I know you say like, you fucking what, man? Are you crazy? Like, no, can you imagine like that if you would grown up the way he grew up and everything was the same? that you would have become Hitler? Do you have the mental capacity to be able to project yourself in that? Or do you not have any ability and say that is impossible? Because I know like this sounds really crazy, but it's important to understand. The reason why I'm giving such a drastic example is because it allows you to understand and detach yourself from your world. Because like, I'm not saying Hitler was a good guy. I'm just saying like, if you would have gone through all the exact same experiences, can you imagine you would have become like him? And I know a lot of people would say like, no, fuck no. But like, same like I would go to ISIS terrorists. Can you imagine that you'd become an ISIS terrorist if you would have gone through the indoctrination? There's a lot of people that are watching this stream and say like, no, that's not possible. But the reason why you say that's not possible, it's not because it was not possible, but it's because you have no ability to look at yourself from an outside perspective. Because what shapes you and shapes your ideas and your morals and everything is the way you interact with your environment and how you grew up. If you grew up by fundamentalists or whatever, then your beliefs will be different. There's a lot of people that are watching the stream right now that cannot imagine that. And that's because you cannot see yourself as an observer. If you see yourself from an observer, you have a much easier time to flip around different people. You can just, compare with different people. You just have an easier time to project in other people. You also have an easier time to truly listen. Because as long as you're trapped inside your own head, and you see the world through your own eyes, and you cannot just understand that you have glasses on that have been defined by how you grew up and have shaped you to see the world because of the way you grew up, you don't have the ability to see other people through their eyes. And if you want to understand the world, you have to be able to see people through their eyes rather than yours. And that is why being able to look at yourself as an observer is fundamental. It is so important. And I'm repeating myself and I'm saying it again, because without it, everything else I'm talking about is worthless. Because you don't even have the ability to see it. You will just see it through your own warped lens. So I wonder if people that are listening to this, if this is actually helping them to start understand, wait, I can look at myself as an observer. Just as I look at someone else, I can do it with my own thoughts and ideas. You have a part in yourself that can do that. Did anyone here, because of this explanation, understood that and are actually starting to think like, wait, I can look at my thoughts and my emotions as an outsider. Wait a minute. Oh, wait, I actually can do that. Yeah, I'm experiencing these things and I'm not this experience. I'm just looking at it as an outsider. Is anyone making the connection, or is this just... This is the most important thing. If you acquire the ability to look at your thoughts and your emotions as an outsider, you literally gain control. More control, a lot more control. Because as long as you're trapped inside your thoughts and your emotions, you do not have the ability to overcome them. You will always be a slave. You will always be a slave. There is nothing you can do about it. So like if you go through life and there is a salesman talking to you, pushing the right buttons, you buy shit you don't need. But now imagine the salesman is selling you shit you don't need and you have the emotion, the gut reaction to do that. If you then at that point have a third person and you look at what's going on, you can go like, wait a minute, I'm going to buy shit I don't need. I can actually overcome that. And basically at that point you can start making, more rational decisions. You have to have the ability to look yourself as an observer, because as long as you don't do that, there is no way you can overcome your thoughts and your emotions that rise up from your subconsciousness. There is no feedback loop between that and your actions. There's nothing in between. While normally you should have these emotions and thoughts, right? You should think about them as an observer, and then by, balancing them out and such, and then act. But a lot of the people, what they do is the following. They have these emotions and thoughts, they act, and then they think about their actions. And this is like the feedback loop all the time. And as a result, they all the time rationalize afterwards what they did. Even if they make a stupid mistake, they will just rationalize, get angry, get triggered, whatever. While if you switch it around and you put the thinking between the thoughts and emotions and your actions, you can actually gain a lot more control and stability in the way you go about life. And that's why I'm saying, and I'm saying it again, being able to look at yourself as an observer is crucial in order for you to grow as a person. Without that, you won't even understand what I'm talking about. So now like that you understand this concept of looking at your own thoughts as an observer, this observer that is looking at the thoughts, right, and these emotions, doesn't really have a story. It's just an observer. It's not attached to identity or anything. It's just looking at it as an observer. Well, that person that is looking at your observer is more you than all the bullshit you're looking at. And what I mean with that is it is more in line with your essence than all these thoughts and emotions. And being able to look at your thoughts and your emotions allows you to let go, allows you to experience the moment, to experience who you are, your essence. Because as long as you're trapped in these thoughts and these emotions, you constantly have this noise in your head. You don't even have the ability to think clearly. And as a result, you're constantly being dragged from one moment to another. And before you know, the day is over, the year is over, your life is over. Before you even know. And the thing is, like, as you grow up, you become more and more, your brain becomes more developed. And there's a certain point where you start reflecting on your life and wonder, what the fuck did I do with my life? And the reason why you do that is because you start just looking at it. Everybody has that moment of more clarity where they look at themselves and they say, what the fuck am I doing? And the reason why you're thinking that is because you're taking distance at that point and actually questioning all the bullshit you're doing. And the thing is, you can do that all the time. And you might say, like, man, that's really depressing. I don't want to think about my life. I don't want to think that I'm wasting my life. I just want to enjoy my life or whatever. But the thing is, by doing so, you create the foundation to be able to be much more in control, to be much more satisfied, to be much more, fulfilled. And that's the beauty of it. Even though it might at the moment require you some energy to put into that, once you are in a flow of being more proactive and less impulsive and more objective and more rational, you will just have more success. That's how it works. Now you might say, like, okay, this third perspective, I get it, I see it. How do I strengthen this objective perspective? Because sometimes emotions are really strong. I say that, you are in front of a girl, poof, you're gone. And you say, like, man, every time I try to be an observer, when I'm in school and I see that one girl, I'm just gone. I lose it. Like, how do I? The best way of building control is by building a stronger connection to your self-knowledge. And I will explain something like, this is what I did research. I did research about this before the sellout stream, also during the sellout stream a little bit. And this is going to be quite interesting for people because this is going to start tackling self-esteem and validation. But what I first want to say is that what you have to know is that first working out and then eating healthy, these two things will drastically enhance your ability to look at yourself as an observer. Drastically. And let me tell you why. Because it increases the blood flow to your brain. And thinking analytically and thinking as an observer and using your prefrontal cortex requires quite a lot of processing power. And as a result, if you eat sugar or if you eat really bullshit, you just inhibit yourself to think as an observer. Working out and eating healthy, it's almost like the fruits of your brain. You got to do that in order to be able to think more clearly and more rational. Workout, eating healthy is also quite important. And then I would say meditation. And I would say workout, eating healthy, and meditation in that order, even though eating healthy is more important than working out, but it's more advanced. And that's why I always say with working out, you can actually start because it gives you a strong self boost. If you're working out and you're lifting these weights or you're jogging or whatever, and you're really you are doing it, it releases endorphins in your brain and it makes you feel good about yourself. You get instant gratification. Maybe during your workout, it's shit, but afterwards you feel good about yourself. And if you start seeing your body becoming more muscular or you start looking more in shape, it gives you more self-esteem, makes you feel better about yourself. And that's why working out is so important, because it's instant gratification. You work out and after that, when you take a shower or whatever, you feel good. Eating healthy is longer. You eat healthy, you see the benefits after a week or two. People that smoke, if you stop smoking, it will take a month or two, but you'd feel much better. But since people that are more impulsive, they need that instant connection. They don't even have the ability to look themselves from an observer and understand wait, if I do this, I'm going to get better. No, they need that direct boost. And that's why working out is so much better. So yeah, that's why I'm saying, but after working out, I would definitely say eating healthy. And after eating healthy, I would say meditation. And doing these things will really help you so much, getting better sleep, less stress. It will just help you so much and will help you to look at yourself as an observer. But I said it again, looking at yourself as an observer is so important. Without it, forget anything about what I said. Just like other people, you listen to other people as an observer, you can do the same for yourself. And by training that, you can really more easily overcome your emotions and your thoughts. And this brings me to the next topic, and it is subconsciousness. So basically, when you think about subconsciousness, when you experience an emotion or a thought, you think oh yeah, these things are happening consciously, right? But that's not true. They take part into the limbic system of your brain. And when you look at human evolution, you see like it goes from more primitive part of the brain to the more advanced parts of the brain. So if you experience something, you are basically a momentary expression of your neural activity. But as your neural activity starts more in the primitive part of the brain and goes more to the advanced part of the brain, you first experience emotion and thoughts, and then afterwards you become aware of them. So when you think about it, even me talking about it, when I'm talking right now, I'm not thinking about what I'm saying. I first just have the words, I say them, and I course correct them as I'm talking. Even when you think about it or when you have a conversation, you don't consciously think what phrases you're going to use. You just speak. It comes natural, right? It's because it's subconscious. Same with emotions. You first experience the emotion and then you become aware of them. And if you understand that dynamic, you understand that you do not have control over the thoughts and the emotions that pop up. And a lot of you guys, I bet a lot of you guys, can sometimes really beat themselves up over them. Like, why do I think that? Or why do I feel like this? But the thing is though, the reason why you feel like that and you think like that, it's not something that is in your control. It happens and then you're aware of them. So it makes no sense whatsoever to beat yourself over your thoughts and the emotions. The only thing that should matter is your actions. And the thing is, the beauty about your actions is you can put in between your ability to look at these thoughts and these emotions as an observer, and then afterwards either act or not act on it. And I'm going to say another thing that is really crazy, but I'm just going to say it, and it's not just something that I say. It's something that even psychologists say. There is nothing wrong with having certain emotions towards, for example, let's say you're really attracted to your dog. There's nothing wrong about this emotion. And you might say like, but what are you saying? That's that shit. You can't do that. You cannot be attracted to your dog. That is fucking disgusting. That's the problem. Because let's say you are attracted to your fucking dog or your cat. I don't give a shit. Let's say that is the case. Then beating yourself up over these emotions and really pushing them away will make it worse. It will make you act upon it. And that is the thing. If you understand the emotion, that is when you can actually experience them and rewrite them differently away. Because every time when you experience an emotion, they become liable and you can rewrite another emotion in it. Every time when you experience an emotion, you change it back. And the thing is, the problem with that, and that's what you have also with pedophiles. The best treatment for pedophiles is not for these people to push away their emotions. Because by doing that, that is exactly what makes them and what turns them into predators. And that is also something that psychologists say. You have to be able to talk about it. You have to be able to, accept it. Because if you push it away all the time, that's when you become a pedophile. You actually act upon it. And that is why it's so important. It's like there is nothing wrong about the emotions. What is wrong is acting upon these emotions. And beating yourself upon these emotions will only make it more likely you will act upon them. Because your primitive part of the brain will just become more and more present, and at certain points you'll just flip out and you do something you don't really want to do consciously. And that's why when you talk to pedophiles, they might say like, yeah, it's just stronger than myself at one point. But that's because they have always been pushing away, never talked about it, whether it's with psychiatrists or whatever, and because it's stigmatized like crazy. The moment you even mention that, you're the devil. And that's the thing, if you understand these things, if you understand that emotions, you do not have to feel guilty whatsoever for what you feel or even what you think. If you understand that, then you can start working on yourself and overcome these emotions and detach yourself from it. And you can only achieve that if you look at yourself as an observer. You see these emotions, they pop up, and you just go like, it's fine to experience these things. And by just experiencing it and not stigmatizing myself and labeling myself for being bad or whatever, I can just release it without having to act upon it. And I'm using really extreme examples because it allows people to be able to be aware that there is nothing wrong about the emotions you feel or even the thoughts that pop up. You do not have control over them. And the more you look at yourself as an observer and the more you have understanding over how you work, the more you can overcome these things and be able to act more consistent with reality. This brings me to the next topic, and that is your subconsciousness. And what I mean with your subconsciousness is like whenever you speak, whenever you talk, whenever you go through life, you have the illusion of having a lot of control, but you actually have very little control. What I just explained earlier. If your thoughts and your emotions are subconscious and you don't look at yourself as an observer, you're literally just an impulsive being and you don't really think so much. Most of the time when you think, it's backwards rationalized after you acted already. So being more self-aware and being able to understand these things allows you to become more intellectual, more capable, more rational. But while you're like that, your subconscious, your emotions, your core emotions are actually more in control than anything else. You're not really in the cockpit. What's in the cockpit is your subconsciousness. And that's why sometimes you can really sit on the sofa, feel like working out and say, why am I not working out? Why am I not doing this? I want to do this, but I'm too fucking lazy. Like you beat yourself over being lazy, or you beat yourself over playing too many games or whatever. You beat yourself over and you say, why am I like this? And that's because on a subconscious level, your emotions is what controls you. You don't have so much control. And you can maybe push yourself and really like create a lot of tension and a lot of dissonance. But understanding how you work and understanding your subconsciousness allows you to be able to more easily put yourself into an action that is much more fulfilling. So I'm going to go a step further here. And I'm going to say, like, if you go to that subconsciousness, like how you feel and, you know, how these emotions frame and define who you are, these foundations have been laid down when you were really young, when you were a child. When you were a child, you were much more primitive. And as you grew up, you start channeling these emotions more intellectually. And basically, like, when you just look at the brain, you have dissonance and you have resonance. It's quite simple. You have positive emotions, you have negative emotions. Basically, negative emotions is fear, positive emotions is love or whatever. And basically, depending on your needs, whether it's food or warmth or whatever, what you miss the most is what you will be more inclined to want. But that is just emotional, because you can literally compare it with a dog. When you were really young, you were a pig. Even a pig's brain at a certain point is more advanced than a child of 1 year. I think a pig is 3-year-old child. So like at a certain point, you were actually even more primitive than a pig. You're just going to imagine that your brain was more primitive than a pig. And as you grew up, you became like a pig, and then you overcome being even more intelligent than a pig. But the reason why I'm explaining this is because you start understanding, like, okay, these fears, just like a pig, it's just very simple. There was a very point at your life where you were very simple. If you didn't get enough food or whatever, or if your parents rejected you or whatever, you lay down these core emotions and connections that will define for a big part how you grow up, what you're interested in, whether you're insecure, whether you're more secure, whether you're focused, whether you have a strong ego, whether you are more understanding, whatever. Like, all these things are actually founded on an emotional level and then get intellectually channeled. So fear is very easily intellectually channeled by distrust. And I'm going to give you guys just one example of how things can all be connected. So when you were young, whenever you wanted to do something, your parents criticized you, put you down, and as a result, whenever your self, part of the self, gets activated, it doesn't get connected to the reward center. The reward center is, by the way, a part in your brain. Whenever it activates, it releases dopamine and shit and makes you feel good. So whenever the part of the self is activated, if it gets inhibited by your parents or your environment, then the self does not get connected to the reward center, and as a result, you feel bad about yourself. Because you grew up, and every time when you wanted to do something, you wanted to show something, your parents dished you for it or whatever, made you feel bad. As a result, you create low self-esteem, you feel low self-worth, and it then starts translating into you're not even sure about your decisions. So you're more easily to listen to what your parents say. You're more easily to have your parents make choices for you because you don't have the confidence to make choices for yourself. As a result, what you also go through is if you make your parents have choices that were bad for you, you will start distrusting them. You will also start distrusting other people. You will start creating ego, because ego is the mechanic that is generated to basically defend yourself, to protect yourself against the outside world. You will start enabling a stronger ego to be able to protect yourself against that bullshit. And as a result, you start becoming distrustful to other people. You start to question things. And just as much as a start, just because of your parents not giving you enough love or whatever, you see an entire chain reaction of literally personality traits that you would see like, this is how I am. I'm just more distrustful, or I'm more this or that. No, it just all comes back to this core self that, depending on how you grew up, can either go one direction or another. And being able to understand that allows you to overcome it. So you can see how low self-esteem is connected with having other people making decisions with you, is connected with distrust when these decisions have been made for you in a bad way, or comfort if these decisions have been made in a way to pamper you and to spoil you, where you just basically stay in the nest and feel like, oh, everything is taken care of. And the thing is, like, only when you get kicked out of the house, you get that reality check and you can grow out of it. But until then, you're basically passively sitting in that comfort bubble. And just how, like, every everything is basically, depending on how you grew up and how you had to take care of yourself, whatever, it actually lays down foundation to these emotions that then get channeled through all these things that you intellectually more get value of. Can become money if your environment always tells you it's all about money, this and that, impressing this and that. If that is always channeled, then when you want to feel good, if you want to have that reward center being stimulated, you do it through money, because that's how you connect it, because of how you grew up. And the thing is, like, if your self-knowledge is not connected to your reward center, then you have low self-esteem. And then you're going to, enable that reward center through the validation of others. You channel it through others rather than to yourself. And that's why if you start understanding these things, you can say like, okay, whoa, but that's really me. That's really me. What you're saying, how do I overcome this? By being aware of it. And it goes even further. I'm going even a step further. In order to understand it, you need to be able to look at yourself as an outsider in order to understand this. Because as long as you're trapped inside your own head, I can talk about these things and it's really very hard to wrap your head around. But if you look at yourself as an observer, it's much more easily to experience these emotions and these thoughts and understand that everything has a subconscious cause. And sometimes it's more intellectually channeled and you have a really core ID, and that's what I call a core value, and it could be family, or it could be friendship, or it could be something out there. You didn't really put it into words yet, but there is something that drives you. Everybody has something that really drives them, whether it's comfort, freedom, knowledge, money, love, relationship, whatever. Everybody has something that drives them that you can track back to these emotions on a core level, this subconscious cocktail of emotions where you feel a lack. And by, going about it in the right way, you can overcome that, and then you can structure yourself more. Like the way I go through life, what I value the most is making sense. That's what my core value is. That's what I'm emotionally attached to. I'm emotionally attached to making sense. Some people can be emotionally attached to family and do just stupid shit because of their family, or they can be emotionally attached to their girlfriend and do stupid shit because of that. Because reason is not something that is fundamental to how you behave. That's something you just use. It's a tool. And the reason why I'm so rational is because I've made reason what I value the most on an emotional level. And that's why I can be so much more structured, is because I'm emotionally attached to just being reasonable. And as a result, if I'm not reasonable, I experience a lot of dissonance. Just like if you're emotionally attached to your family and you do something against your family, you experience a lot of dissonance. That's why you keep your behavior into track. But the reason why I'm explaining all this is so people can understand how everything has a core, foundation of emotions, and being able to understand where your behavior comes from and being able to look at it as an outsider, really important, allows you to be able to create these connections of self-knowledge, for example, and connect it to your reward center. And that's why a relationship can help a lot for some people. Some people, like when they get into a relationship and they get loved, suddenly they feel great about being together with the girl, right? And that's how they connect themselves. They get a lot of validation out of that. And they find a pathway of feeling better about themselves and have more self-esteem because of a girl. But that can still be like only channeled through the girl. And then when the girlfriend dumps you or whatever, it can become more needy. You can become more needy or whatever. And I'm going to give you guys a little example of an experiment they did. It was in the 70s, I think, where they tried to do a therapy with someone that was gay. And back then it was all frowned upon. And they put a thing into the brain of the guy that stimulated the reward pathway whenever he saw a girl. And they could just trigger it, and they wanted to recondition him because it was a disease or whatever. It was very unethical, but either way, I'm just saying, like, as long as the reward center was stimulated, the person he wanted to just stimulate it. That's all he wanted to do. And they also did it with mouses, with rats even before that. And basically the mouse ran on a wheel, and when they ran, it got stimulated, and the mouse just keeps running until it dies, doesn't eat anymore anything. So it just goes to show how much we are just designed to stimulate our reward center. And that's why if you have a girlfriend, you can become very needy because the girlfriend might stimulate your reward center. But if you can stimulate your reward center to your self-knowledge, you're much more independent. You're much more by yourself, and you can create that connection between the two through meditation, through understanding, through knowledge, but always looking at yourself as an outsider, and also just through simple NLP or conditioning, looking at yourself, always connecting yourself, a good feeling. Working out can also help. Just doing things that really make you feel good about yourself. Can be intellectually, can also be practically. And by doing so, you create a pathway, literally a pathway between yourself and the reward center. But I'm going a step further, and I'm saying that if you fully understand that what you are is more than just this idea of the self, you can even overcome this need of validation that so many people have because you understand that the world doesn't resolve around you. You're not the center. And if you fully, truly understand that, then it doesn't matter what other people think about you. If you truly understand that the world doesn't resolve around you and that the environment is part of what you are, and let me just elaborate on that, like you are basically all your neural activity. And what I mean with that is there's nothing external. There's only your experience. You're literally just your neural activity. When you watch me and I'm talking to you, you go like, okay, you conceptualize there's a guy talking to me, but on a neurological level, I'm basically part of your experience. And the reason why you see me as an outsider and what you think as an insider is because you have these concepts. But there is actually nothing external. And if you understand that on an actual physical, neurological level, there is no such a thing as external. Even the idea of something external is just a concept within your brain. You can more easily understand that the idea of you being the center of the world is dysfunctional, it's flawed. And being able to really fully see that and understand that will make you feel more at ease to put distance of this strong urge of validation seeking, because you know that getting the validation of others is because you want to feel more important about yourself. You want it to be about you. Well, that's not even what you are. It's like cells in a body. They're interconnected with the organism, and the organism is interconnected with it. You can't just disconnect it. And that's what we do when we grow up in this flawed identity and individualism society. We literally all believe we're Superman. And what I mean with that is we have this sense of story, this identity that we attach ourselves value on, strong emotional value, because that's how we grow up. We grow up to score good points, to be better than others. Like everything is focused on that. And as a result, we create this strong emotional attachment to this idea of who we are. But that's not really who we are. It's just a story. What we are is literally all the neural activity. It's our environment. It's what we experience at any given moment. And being able to detach yourself from all these identity and these strong labels allow you to be more in the present, to experience more than now, to experience more what you are. But in order to understand what I all say here, you need to be able to look at yourself from a third perspective. It's really, really important. And the reason why I'm explaining all this, and I know it's quite a lot of information, is because if you really watch it and really listen, you start understanding how, how everything is connected and how everything's basically traceable when you just look at evolutionary biology. And that's why understanding how the brain works and understanding how we've evolved as human species can greatly enhance your ability of self-control and growing as a person. And even if certain parts in your growth were big bumps in the road, you can still overcome them. Of course, I don't know to which extent what I'm saying here is fully understandable, but I'm going to tell you, and this is even more important than almost anything else I have said, because if you don't understand this, then everything I've said, you won't even listen. It's be able to truly listen. And what I mean with that is, when I say you look at yourself as an observer, the emotions and the thoughts, you can do that also when you look at someone else. You look at them as an observer, not within your reality, through their eyes. So being able to understand what I say really requires you a strong will to understand and trying to understand and truly listen. And the way you truly listen is by being unbiased. Because if you listen to me and you constantly connecting, because I see it sometimes in the chat, this guy is just full of shit, this and that, you're constantly getting triggered because you're trapped inside your head. You're not really looking at it as an outsider. You're constantly connected. You're not processing the information through my own eyes. And as a result, you are even understanding things and hearing things I didn't even say. And that's why it's so important to try and understand the person when you talk to them. It's more important than what you think you heard is to understand what he actually tried to say. Even when you use words like concepts like chair or whatever, a car, when I say a car and I say visual a car, or when I say visualize a tool and a color, almost everybody's just thinking about a red hammer, but there's also a lot of other people thinking maybe about scissors or whatever. And the thing is when you talk to someone and you speak about the word concepts like God or freedom or whatever, everybody has a different upbringing and has a different definition for it. And that's why it's so important to understand the person and see it through their world. And then be able to attach it. And that is the other thing. That is the first thing is try to understand the other person. And in order to make it part of your own is by being able to relate it to your own experience. And that's why examples can be very helpful. Because that's when knowledge becomes awareness. It's when you can connect it through your own experience. And that's why truly listening and really putting effort and trying to understand what does he mean with that, where does that relate to, allows you to more easily grasp these insights that will benefit you a lot. When it comes down to looking at these things and truly listening and being able to make connections and being able to relate it to your own experience is fundamentally important to understand what I'm talking about. Because that's what most people do. They have their own worldview, their own ideas, and they try to look at things to make them connect with what they already experience and try to resonate with it. And that's why you even warp information. It's called confirmation bias. You warp information so that it can fit in your current paradigm. When it dissonates, like let's say you're very attached to the idea of money or very attached to the idea of identity. When I say like this identity is just flawed and it's fake, you will experience a lot of dissonance. You will want to fight it. It's very important to listen. It's really very important to listen, try to understand what I say, because that's how you grow and that's why it works. But like, let's say you experience dissonance. What happens is your ego gets very easily triggered. And what is the ego? The ego is like a survival mechanism, like a lion that growls or whatever. Ego is actually just a defense mechanism to protect yourself. And ego can also get activated when, like not when your life is threatened, but also when your beliefs are threatened. And it's actually funny when you know how the brain works. If you know that neurons actually, literally, depending on whether they get neural activity or not, if a certain thought or idea doesn't get neural activity, these neurons actually die out. It's quite funny if you think about it, that when you are really stuck to believing a certain belief, that it's these neurons fighting for their life in a sense. It's kind of funny. But either way, basically being aware of how your ego works is very important. So basically ego is just this survival instinct that tries to protect you against the outside world, and it's very primitive. It's not rational at all. And basically can be more active in one person than another. And depending on how you grew up, it's stronger or less strong. But it's just there to protect yourself. And the thing is like, it's very primitive. So it doesn't think rationally. So it's really like very, very primitive. And as a result, when it gets activated, literally they call it amygdala hijack. When you feel threatened, and that's even with your beliefs, your amygdala hijacks, knocks down your rational part of the brain, and you can't think properly anymore. And then you really become in that cycle of just pure impulsivity, defense mechanism. It's like literally like a dog or a cat. You take away the food, it fights. It wants to protect itself. It's like the same thing but with beliefs. And that's why when I talk about things and it threatens your beliefs or your paradigm, it's very easy for your ego to get activated and as a result just completely deflect what I said. Even what I said might be correct. And you see that a lot with religious people. When you talk about religion to religious people and you show them facts, like they very easily deflect them and really become very, very strongly egoic response. And the funny thing is, by doing that, you are actually making it worse. When you confront a religious person about religion being flawed and stuff, you make them believe even stronger in their religion. And that is why it's so important to be able to always understand the person and see the world through their eyes than just trying to approach them through your paradigm. You always have to try and point out flaws through their world. You talk to them, you try to understand, and then pinpoint things. And that's what they also call emotional intelligence. And if you understand that, you will a lot less get pissed by saying like, yeah, I try to understand. I try to explain this to these guys and they never understand and it pisses me off. It's not so much because it pisses you off. It's not their fault. It's because you don't really fully understand how the brain works. And when you understand that, you start more be understanding. And if it doesn't really work so well, then you don't even put time or effort in talking to them anyway, because you know it's not that productive to do. But either way, what I just want to say is if you understand the ego as well, and you understand that ego gets activated to defend yourself, and you know that it's actually not needed anymore, when there is a concept, when there is a belief that you have that is flawed, it is good to be able to challenge it and change it. It is a good thing to do. But in order to be able to do that, you need to be able to understand that your beliefs and your emotional attachment to them is a subconscious pattern that emerges from your limbic system. And as a result, the only way for you to be able to detach yourself from these beliefs is by looking at them as an observer and disconnect the emotion with the belief. And that's when you start looking at the world and reality for what it is, rather than through your lens, your emotional lens. You don't really connect a strong emotion to your thoughts and your beliefs. You just try to see things, and when something is better, you just adopt it. And that is a very important insight, because as long you don't really fully understand that, you will just be stuck into your own beliefs and think like, oh, this is how it is. And that's why also absolute truths is such a big issue. Certain people think, oh, there is right and wrongs. Murdering is wrong, or this is wrong, or this is wrong. But there's not such a thing as absolute rights and wrongs. Everything is probabilistic. And being able to understand that allows you more easily to detach yourself from your beliefs. Because if you believe in absolute truths, there is very little I can do to explain it. Because if you believe God is absolutely true, there's nothing that can convince you otherwise. That's why absolute truths is very dangerous. There's no such a thing as absolute truth. Even you existing is not an absolute truth, because it takes place in time and space, and you don't even know if, time and space exist scientifically. We don't even know if that exists. But either way, I'm not going to derail too much into that. Maybe I'll have a talk about that in another time. But what I just want to explain is, if you understand the ego and you understand how the ego works, and you understand that it knocks out your prefrontal cortex while you're rational thinking, then you can understand that when you are experiencing ego, you're just less capable of processing information. And that brings me to the second topic in that regard, is that ego is a very primitive emotion. But just as fear and insecurities or whatever gets channeled through distrust to more intellectual concepts, ego can also be channeled through intellectual concepts. And ego can get channeled through identity, and they can strengthen each other. So basically, identity is the intellectual entity that gets channeled through ego. So basically, when they are threatened, they can strengthen, and they can also just be more connected to each other. The more primitive part of the brain, which is ego, can be very much connected through identity, and as a result, they can either both activate all the time, or one can activate, or the other can activate. It depends. So from person to person, you have people that have a strong ego and identity. You have people with a strong identity with weak ego, and you have people with a strong ego without strong identity. So it depends what parts of the brain are more advanced and more developed. But each person, each case is different situation, has to be approached differently. But I just want to explain, because I bet people that are watching the stream go like, oh yeah, I'm more like this or I'm more like that. That's why I'm just explaining it. And that's why being aware of these things and being able to look at yourself as an observer, you can even see, like even at some points, your ego getting activated. You can actually see it. And it's some exercise you guys can do when you go to school. School is starting soon anyway. When you go to school and stuff, when you're just looking at people talking, or even yourself, how you feel, if you feel insecure or whatever, you can really look at yourself as an outsider and go like, hey, I'm feeling insecure now, or I'm feeling this, or I'm feeling that. It really allows you to much more easily be able to understand where these things come from and work on that.
Subscribe to youtube.com/AtheneWins. Watch the live stream at twitch.tv/AtheneLive and follow The Real Athene on Snapchat.